Hi, I'm Cecil Walker,
And I'm Adam Frower.
and this is Possibilities. Today we're going to be chatting about assertiveness and I guess all the questions that can come out of what to do with that, how to do it, when to do it. And I guess the place that we usually start is just by kind of getting some context around what are we even talking about when we talk about assertiveness. What is it to be assertive? What is assertiveness? What's good, bad, right, or wrong about assertiveness?
No, be assertive! Beep, beep. Not insertive!
Wow, I don't know if I can answer all of those things, but
Go for it. I'll be on vacation over here.
but I'll do my best. So I think if I were to begin, I would say, what is assertiveness? And I think one of the ways that I might describe or define assertiveness is by inserting a different word, maybe advocate. So I think when I'm assertive, I'm advocating for what I need, or maybe I'm advocating on behalf of someone else. So I am assertive. I think sometimes, obviously, one of the kind of antonyms of assertiveness is passivity. And I think we can go through life in a very passive way, let life happen, let things just unfold before us. Or we can be assertive. We can assert ourselves into life in a particular way. I can advocate for what I need. I can advocate for what other people need. And so I think sometimes we think of assertiveness with a bit of a negative connotation at times, but I don't think it has to be. I think you can be assertive and put that into the context of that's the opposite of just letting life passively go by.
Yeah.
So I think that might be a place where I would begin.
Yeah, I like that. I think when I think of, being assertive appropriately, it does seem to carry this implication of there's something important that needs to be advocated for, that needs to be stood up for or spoken about or, highlighted in some type of way, respected and given the attention that it needs. And so it does feel like something very, very different than just aggression or taking up too much room or something like that. And so I think obviously then that means that there are times where I hate to always put the qualifier of should and shouldn't, but there probably are times where you should be assertive, right? Because there probably are things that you value that are important that need to be advocated for, that need to be spoken up about. Whether that's, values that you hold, or that's boundaries, that need to be maintained, or that's maybe other people in your life or causes or something like that. I like the word advocate because it feels like we can really apply that to a lot of tangible things. And I think the same could be said about assertiveness.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things that I was going to say too, which you kind of highlighted, is if I have values or if I have things that are important to me, that implies some forethought and some awareness. And I think that forethought and awareness is really important when it comes to assertiveness, is that I have to know what I'm being assertive for and about. So I think I have to know, what are my values? I have to know, what are the things that really mean something to me, so I know when to be assertive. If I understand what those values are, if I understand myself really well, then I know how I need to stand up for myself depending on the situation. There might be times where I might evaluate and say, well, that person may not be important enough to me that I need to be assertive about this thing. They won't understand what I value and why I value it. And so you can kind of let assertiveness go by because it's based on my values and it's based on the context. Whereas other times it might be that particular person or this particular situation, it demands that I am assertive, because if I'm not assertive in this situation, I might compromise my values or the things that are really important to me. And so I need to stand up for myself, or I need to advocate for myself in order for me to stay true to these particular values.
Yeah.
And so I think that there has to be some forethought around that. But the other thing that you also said kind of in passing was, well, this is not aggression. And I guess that's my question is like, what's the distinction between aggression and assertiveness?
Well, when you frame it that way, it makes it seem a little fuzzier. I think in the context that we've been describing, I really like this idea of I'm standing up for something important. And maybe some people might use aggression for that cause. I don't think that's a requirement to be assertive. But I don't think aggression without assertiveness is the same thing. I don't think, being very confrontational or aggressive or pushing things, other people, other things, other ideas out of the way, causing conflict without that key component of this is for an important cause, this is for something I'm standing up for, this is for something that needs voice given to it. That I feel like is much more problematic because, I guess there's all kinds of reasons why aggression might come out. It could be for feeling threatened. It could be for sake of ego. It could be for maybe just being in unfamiliar territory, and that's just the natural responses. I'm going to be aggressive, but assertion, being assertive, I feel like that needs to be anchored with this foundational piece of it's not even about whether I want to or not. It's about it needs to be said or needs to be done because there is something important attached to this, whatever that important thing is.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's kind of underlying what you were saying is the underlying emotion that's, I think oftentimes with aggression, the underlying emotion is anger. Mm-hmm. That I'm being aggressive from a place of anger or frustration or something mm-hmm. along those lines. Whereas I think you can be assertive and be very contrite.
Yeah.
You could say it's hard for me to bring this up. It's hard for me to say these things, but I feel like this is something that's important that I need to advocate for. And so I think that the underlying emotion and therefore the delivery can be quite different. I think another word that maybe we need to throw into the mix here is confrontational. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we think of aggression as synonymous to confrontational. And I don't think that those things necessarily have to go together. I think that you can be aggressive and bulldoze. It's not so much like we are conflicting with one another, or we're in conflict with one another. You could just bulldoze over the top of me because you're very aggressive. And I think the same, I could confront something, but I could do it in a way that's very contrite or very humble, or I'm trying to figure out a way to negotiate mm-hmm. here. So you're confronting the issue at hand without a sense of aggression or anger or frustration. And so I think that assertive, if we're going to be assertive, again, I think it's based on what are the values that I have. I need to address this, so I need to confront this issue, but I want to do it in a way where I can preserve who I am or what I value, or that I want to preserve this relationship. So I want to make sure that I don't go into it in an angry, frustrated way, but instead I want to bring it to you in a way of I hope this brings us closer together that I'm talking about this. And so just because I'm being assertive doesn't mean that I have to obliterate relationships along the way.
Mm-hmm. I think that's significant. I think, in tangent with what I was saying of it's anchored by this is about something important, then that means it's going in with an intention of there's a certain outcome that we're trying to achieve from this. And that's a very different kind of interaction than just an aggressive outlash or you know, some type of conflict built on just the emotion of anger or frustration or something. Those, I would think, don't tend to have an intentional outcome in mind, or this is for an important cause and we're trying to get to a certain type of place. I think that's just something that comes out. I think I have two, I think, pretty big questions, and I was wondering what the order of them should be. But you already actually started to speak to one, and I think that one probably should go first. And it's, when is the right time to be assertive? When is it time to look around and say, well, I think I need to speak up about this thing, or I need to advocate for this, or I need to confront this person about this thing? You started to say a little bit about that before, but how do we know, especially if you're not that kind of a person too, how do you know when it's time to turn on the assertiveness?
That's a complicated question, because I think the line might be different for different people. I think some people who are really comfortable with being assertive, I think the line might be very early on, and they might say, look, I'm really not okay with what just happened. I really want to address it quickly. And so it might be in the moment thing. And there are other people who are much less comfortable with assertion or confrontation, who might say, like, I need the line to be back a bit, and I need lots of things to kind of build up for me to be able to say, okay, now is the point where I need to be assertive. And I don't know if we could place value on one of those approaches over the other. So again, I think part of it comes back to like knowing yourself, knowing what kind of person you are. I think that plays a big part. The other thing I would say is it depends on, oftentimes when we talk about assertive, inherently in that idea is that it's within a relationship of some kind. I have the need to be assertive, not toward myself per se, but I guess you could be assertive with yourself. But oftentimes it's, I need to assert myself with someone else, or with a different entity, with a company, with a, some other external factor than me. And so I think that, again, knowing where you value relationships, knowing which relationships you really value and hold on to, and which relationships you think, okay, I think I could do without that relationship. Knowing yourself, knowing where you place value on those things, I think would help you make a decision of, is assertiveness required here? Is assertiveness something that I need to take hold of in this particular relationship? And so I think it's not just knowing myself, knowing my values, but it's also knowing relationships and saying which of these relationships align with the kind of person I want to be. So I think that's one factor. I'll stop there and then maybe add some more later. But
yeah, well, just in what you already said, I liked how built into that there's this implication of assertiveness can be called upon and be necessary, not just in like a conflict with a problematic person or a problematic relationship, like this is a bad person or someone that I don't want to engage with, but can be necessary in meaningful relationships, close relationships. And probably that's where it's even, more important. Because again, if this is built on top of like, here's the kind of person I want to be, here's the values that I have, here's the kind of relationship I want to have. So I need to be assertive for this reason. And I think that can be where it can be, the most difficult, but even maybe more necessary. So we're not just talking about, conflict shows up in, that neighbor that you really don't like, or that person at work that you just have this, hidden rivalry with, or something like that. It can be in really important and close kinds of relationships too.
Yeah, and I think you just think about like a partnership relationship. You kind of move through developmental stages of a partnership of like just meeting each other until like potentially being fully committed to each other. And I think assertiveness is valuable in helping move from one stage in the relationship to the other. If the relationship is important to me, I need to assert that it's important to me. I need to communicate that. I need to and I think sometimes, like in dating relationships, there's an incongruence or there's a miscommunication around like, how much are we asserting that for this relationship? How much are we like promoting or advocating for this relationship? And I think sometimes people disagree around like, where are we in this relationship, or how important is this relationship, or again, you kind of mentioned an outcome, like, what do I ultimately want from this relationship? Do I want this to be a long-term relationship? And so I think if I know who I am, if I know what kind of relationship I'm hoping to be in, then I know where and when to assert for this relationship. Whereas at other times I might lay back a bit and be like, you know what, I just want to kind of see what happens and what becomes of this. And so then there might be a much more passive approach to a relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that advocating or asserting for a particular relationship really depends on what do you want out of this relationship, and that will help kind of determine where and when to advocate.
Yeah, I agree. I think you bring it to a partnership kind of relationship, and I think that's a great depiction of exactly what we're talking about, because I think what's important to you should be kept in mind as you're navigating that thing. And I think a partnership is a good place where you can kind of see how the absence of assertiveness will only lead to building of resentment, more conflict, some eruption down the line, or a stunting of the development of that relationship. You can never get to a place of, well, what is important to this person? What is the right way to navigate this relationship? How do I interact with this person? What are the things that they're wanting and that I'm wanting? And how do we communicate these things and work out the balance between the two sides of this partnership? It feels like you kind of are just spinning your wheels without going anywhere if there's never an assertion of, here's what I need, here's a boundary that was crossed, here's something that's important, here's the outcome that I need to advocate for. I think that's a great demonstration of, here's what happens when we miss the mark on when assertiveness should have shown up, but it didn't. You said there's more.
Yeah, I was thinking too, the other piece about that I was thinking about is, again, you're going to be assertive in different ways depending on what kind of situation that you're in. The same way, like if I'm in a partnership that I really want to last for a long time, I'm going to be very assertive in a different way than I might be in a parent-child relationship, right? If I'm the parent in a relationship and I have something to teach my children, I'm going to be very assertive about, like, you need to do it this way, or here are the benefits of doing this, here are the consequences of not doing this. And so I'm going to be very assertive. And again, that's not in a confrontational way, but that's in a teaching, that's in a advocating for growth, advocating for you becoming the best version of yourself that you want to be. And so I think, but that changes significantly when you're in the child role of a relationship. If I assert myself too strongly in a parent-child relationship, I might get disciplined. I might get in trouble, right? So I have to understand my role. And I think that it's easy to see in a parent-child relationship, but I think that that's really consistent with lots of other relationships. If I'm in a boss-employee relationship, how and what I am assertive about is very different. And so I think, like a lot of the topics that we get to in possibilities, I think understanding, I'll just put it into like social location, makes a big difference as far as like what I'm going to, like, if I'm in a marginalized population who's being oppressed, then the demand for being assertive might be really, really high, but the cost for being assertive might also be very high. And so I have to weigh those, and I have to say, am I more okay kind of taking this because it would put me in jeopardy not to? Or do I need to be really assertive because I want this to stop and there's a potential that it could if I stand up for myself? And so I think understanding that social location really can impact how assertive or in what way I'm assertive. And so I think, again, it comes back to knowing myself, knowing my situation, knowing my values. Those things intersect with a social location or a context, and it really then helps me to make some decisions. But I have to know myself really, really well in order to be purposeful about doing that.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the word cost, because that's exactly the word I was thinking of too. And I think that's a huge factor in determining, we're trying to answer the question of when is the right time to start to be assertive. I think that's a huge factor in determining that, because I think there could be a cost for one way or another to not be assertive in lots of different situations could mean you're sacrificing something. You're sacrificing the thing that's being violated or threatened, that boundary that's being crossed. You're sacrificing, a bit of your commitment to some value or some way of being or something like that. Maybe even a relationship, there's a component to it that you're sacrificing, some independence of yours that you're sacrificing, something like that. And that's a cost that you're paying. But in not being assertive and paying that cost, you must be essentially in some way saying, this is worth it. I'm going to pay this for the gain of maybe things stay stable, or there's an absence of confrontation. There's a peace that I'm keeping. There's things won't shake up and get worse, or I won't face the retaliation of, like you were saying, if I'm at some type of social location disadvantage, I won't have to deal with the threat of some type of consequence for trying to, make an attempt to do something about the social structure that's in place. I think, you're taking the cost of not doing the thing that, you would need to do to be assertive. But on the flip side, if you do choose to be assertive, there's a cost in that too. I now have to not create a confrontation, but I have to engage in a somewhat confrontational kind of way. I have to make this interaction happen, and there could be consequences to that. This person might be upset. They might retaliate back. They might, who knows what they might do or say, or how the relationship might change, or how the situation might change. But in doing that and being assertive, and I think this is what could teach a lot of us when are the moments to be assertive. It probably is happening at a moment where you're saying, it costs too much to do nothing. I'm not willing to give up what I have to give up to stay quiet or unassertive. I need to get the thing that I'm protecting or working for in being assertive, because the absence of that is too costly. I can't allow that thing to go by.
Yeah, and I can't help but think of the work that we do in our therapy work, where we begin with an outcome. We say, like, what is the outcome that you're hoping for? And then the rest of the work becomes like the description of, if that outcome were to take place, what would be different? What would you notice? All of these kinds of things. And I think it's the same thing here. When deciding whether to be assertive or not, we have to think, okay, what is the outcome that we're looking for? And then if I advocate in that way, if I try to be assertive in that way, what does that look like? What would be necessary? How would I know that the person or the entity that I'm trying to advocate with is receptive to that? How do I know when I've pushed hard enough? How do I know when I need to let go? Maybe because they get it, or maybe because I realize, it doesn't matter how much I advocate, maybe they're not going to get it. And so I think that, again, kind of having the end state in mind helps us to make decisions as we walk through the process. I don't know if we can know when we begin the process of, okay, I'm gonna step up in this way, I'm gonna advocate in this way, I'm gonna be assertive in this way. We don't always know how the other person or the entity will respond. And so I think part of holding on to the outcome will help us in the midst to be flexible along the way, to say, are they responding in a way that's going to get me closer to the outcome I'm hoping for? Or are they responding in a way that's going to get me farther away from what it is that I'm hoping for? Being able to hold on to that outcome helps me then navigate, do I continue to be assertive in this way because I'm ultimately going to get to where I want to be? Or do I need to pull back a bit? Do I need to take a different tactic to this because it's getting me farther away than where I want to be? And so I think, again, kind of holding on to, why am I doing this in the first place, helps me know how to do it in the process.
Yeah, I think what that reveals is that in going through with this assertiveness, things move regardless. They're going to move in some type of way. And that's, what's at the heart of the work that we do is change. There will be some type of change that comes from that, especially if these actions are taken with the intention of, there's a certain outcome I'm trying to get to. And so I'm doing what I'm doing for this reason, to be this kind of a person, to move in this type of a direction. The second question that I had...
I forgot you even had a second question.
I didn't. But we've kind of already spoken to it a bit, and I think it's really at the heart of this conversation. You've already said a lot about it. That's what's the right way to be assertive. You know, if I am doing it and it is the right time and it's for the right cause, the right reason, and I have good intentions about the outcome, what's the right way to be assertive? And you've already said a bit about, like, you know, it looks different for different people and maybe even different dynamics, but yeah, what's the right way?
Yeah, I think this might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but I think it really depends on who you are. And I also think it depends on what the outcome is that you're hoping for. Many people watching will know that we're very close to Elliot Connie. And I think the way that he portrays assertiveness is very different than I think the way that either of us would portray assertiveness. And for a long time, it was difficult for me to watch him be assertive. He is very straightforward. He is very blunt. He doesn't mince words. He doesn't coddle people. He doesn't try to protect their feelings, which is very different than the way that I would be assertive. I would be very tentative. I would be like, try to reduce confrontation. And for a long time, it was hard for me to watch him do that without saying, like, you're doing that wrong. Like, you are offending people. You are hurting people's feelings. And he and I would have conversations about it. We would be assertive about our way of doing confrontation. And one of the things that I realized in watching him and watching myself and realizing is that we come from very different backgrounds. And so what he feels like he needs to do to advocate for himself is very different than what I think I need to do. I think power plays a role in that. I think race plays a role in that. I think background plays a role in all of that. I haven't felt like throughout life that I need to advocate for myself really strongly. I feel like opportunities come to me. I feel like I have a good work ethic, which speaks for itself. And so oftentimes opportunities just come. I don't feel like I have to really be assertive. I also don't feel like people are confrontational with me a whole lot. And part of that, I'm sure, is a personality thing. Part of it is I don't confront other people very often. And I think Elliot would come from a very different place where confrontation seems to come regularly to him. And again, I think part of that is his personality. I think part of that is his social location. And so it is really unfair for me to look at him and say, the way that you're being assertive is wrong. Because I'm not him. I don't have his background. I'm not from his social location. And so I'm trying to impose on him, this is the right way to do it, or this is the wrong way to do it. Well, that's what fits for me, my personality, my social location, and it is completely different for him. And it's equally disrespectful or disregarding of me when he looks at me and he says, you're doing it wrong. You're not advocating. You're not assertive enough. Because again, he doesn't know what my personality is. He doesn't know what I value. And so I think one of the things that we have really learned about walking through this path together is the way he does assertiveness and the way I do assertiveness is really different. I can't place value on his and he can't place value on mine. And we really just have to, I think, a co-trait or a companion trait that's important here is trust. That if somebody feels like they need to be assertive in a particular way, I have to trust that they know themselves, they know their circumstances, they know their situation way better than I do. And so I have to try to be supportive. I have to say it's well within your rights to be assertive in that way, even if that's not the way I would do it. And so I don't know if there is like a one size fits all, but I think he knows himself really well. He knows what makes him decide I need to be assertive. And I would say I know myself pretty well, and I know what makes me decide I need to be assertive. And so I think that's where it's more important. I think instead of judging each other, having conversations and understanding, like, how do you make the decisions you make? When do you make the decisions you make? That's probably more valuable than why are you making that decision?
Yeah. I think that says a lot about the variation in circumstance and personal experience that can speak to moments of confrontation or assertiveness, moments of when do I need to speak up and not, and how do I need to speak up and not. and I can't speak for Elliot because I think our personalities too are also different, but we have a shared culture in this kind of broadly common Black culture. And I think for probably lots of reasons, there is this strong value in the culture of, my personal reputation can't be disrespected or tarnished. And that's a serious affront if, someone does that, especially in a public kind of a way or like in an observable way to other people. And that's a really big deal. And it's almost even felt as like a moral thing of you have to assert yourself if someone wrongfully or spitefully disrespects your reputation, says something bad about you, tarnishes who you are to the people around you. And I guess because it almost feels like we only have so much, right? Like there's more to lose if you put me in a certain box or categorize me as a certain kind of a person, especially if that's coming from a place of some type of like racialization or bias or something like that. So what that tells me though is that different people then might be having to juggle different factors in having to speak up for what's important for them in different ways, but also about different things at different times. And in hearing you describe that, it also kind of said to me that, well, then that means that I could totally miss if there's a moment where someone else needed to be assertive. And that kind of reinforces the idea of then people should be very intentional about and put a lot of effort into trying to make sure they take the right moments to be assertive about the right things that they need to. Because I personally would want to learn and grow from that. If I crossed a boundary or did something that violated, something that's important or a value to someone else, if they took that opportunity to be assertive about what that thing is, then I could learn from that and see, oh, I didn't even realize, like you were saying, you and Elliot come from totally different places. I didn't even realize that this was something worthy of being assertive about from you. I didn't realize I had done something that actually interfered with something that's really important to you. Because I think what being assertive does then is creates opportunity for those other people, or for the environment around you even to grow and move according to this information from you, because without that, either it totally misses it. The environment around you, the system you belong to, the people you're interacting with, they'll miss it if you're not assertive about those things. And they won't even see that there's a need there's a value there's a boundary there. Or they'll just learn that in the interaction with you in this system, it's okay to cross those things. Those things aren't that important at all. Or there's no consequence for it. So that's something we can just do when we need to do it. And so I think being assertive isn't just I got to be a harsh person or a confrontational person. It's I have to make sure I'm throwing this information into the equation so that it can change to accommodate for that. So that at least there's an awareness of this factor here is important too.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that brings up for me is that oftentimes we're nervous or we're unsure about when to be assertive. But I think one of the things that you just said speaks to the value of doing it early. At the first offense, even though I might be a little nervous and have some trepidation around like, how are you going to take this? It's easier if I address one incident than if I let like 4, 5, 6 incidences pile up. And then I come to you and I say, you know what, you've done these things over and over and over, and it's really starting to bother me. The natural reaction or response is, well, why didn't you tell me when this had happened once? Like, I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. Now I'm in a place where I feel like I need to make excuses, where I feel like the burden shifts from me to you because you didn't say anything. How did I even know? But if I say something on time number 1, even if it's uncomfortable, it's a much smaller issue than if I let 5, 6, 7 incidences build up. The likelihood of my being assertive coming to you and you being receptive is much more likely if I can be courageous and do it after the first attempt rather than wait until things pile up.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it, again, to use that kind of like sensitive terminology, starts to feel like then the system is operating with more accurate information rather than moving and operating with the absence of information. And so those multiple times going by are reinforcing a certain type of a narrative, a certain type of here's the way that things go and how we interact. And it might push back on, you trying to be assertive later on in a way that it would do less of if you had started it earlier on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Anything else you want to make sure that we get to or we add about being assertive?
I think we asserted pretty much everything we needed to say about that.
Good. Well, hopefully that conversation around being assertive and what it is and how to do it is useful to you. We would love to hear your thoughts about assertiveness. And if you disagree with us, please let us know. We would also like to hear that. But if you feel like this is useful or you feel like somebody could benefit from this conversation, please send this on to them. It would mean a lot to us. And in the meantime, be thoughtful about how and what you want to be assertive about.